Congrats on 80 subs, Frank. Great moves, keep them up. My Linux skills and ThinkPad T420, thank you.
With another video, and as always we got the boy Totoro right here in the background. Fun fact, still haven't seen the movie, but here we are. So yeah, basically today we're going to be covering how to use Fdisk to create a partition on a disk, and basically we're also going to see how to create a file system on that partition and mount it to our Linux system. So the first thing I'm going to do here is we can see that I have a Vagrant file already, and basically I'm just going to use this to spin up a quick virtual machine in VirtualBox. So I'm using Vagrant for this. I'll probably drop another video on this if you guys are interested, but basically I just do Vagrant space up, and this is going to spin up a virtual machine with a CentOS 7 base image. It'll update the packages, and it'll add a second disk that I configured there so that we can use for this video. So I'll go ahead and let this run real quick. Normally it's pretty quick. Sometimes when it goes, through the package updates, it might take a bit, but I'll just go ahead and skip over to the VM already up and running. So updates finished running. At this point I have a virtual machine up and running, so I'm gonna go ahead and type in Vagrant SSH to drop into the virtual machine. Okay, so now we're logged into the virtual machine via SSH, and the first command we're gonna run is the lsblk list block devices. So we see here that we have our root partition, basically our primary disk, right, with the root partition. So disk, then partition number 1. And here we can see the second additional disk that I added to this virtual machine. And we can see there's nothing under it because we don't have any partitions created under this disk. So to change that, we can go ahead and I don't know why I just did that. So to change that, we can go ahead and create our first partition using Fdisk. So we can do sudo space Fdisk and then the actual block device. In this case it's going to be dev/hdb. And here you're basically dropped into the command line for Fdisk. And as it says right there, you can type M and you'll get a list of options available to you. In this case, the first option or command that I want to show you guys in Fdisk is P, which prints our partition table. So when we do P on our new disk, we can see that there's no partition set up, so all we get is an empty table. So I want to go ahead and actually create a new partition, so we can use the n command to go ahead and do that. So -n, and here you'll be prompted with the option to either set up a primary partition or an extended partition. Basically you can only have up to 4 partitions on an MBR typed disk, but the workaround around that is to use an extended partition. But in this case, I just want a primary partition. I'm not gonna have 4 partitions on this disk, so I'll leave it as default and just press enter. Here you can give it a number. Again, I'm just gonna keep it as 1, so we can hit enter. And then here we're basically gonna specify the sector where we want our partition to start. For the most part, I've never really had to enter anything custom here. I always leave it at default. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit enter. Now here is basically where we determine where we want it to end. In this case, I just want to create 10 gigabytes or something, so I'm gonna do plus 10 and then G. So you can see here, you can see the options here available to do it this way, or if you're hardcore and you actually want to specify the actual sector number, you can go ahead and do that. But again, I'm just going to do plus 10G for a 10 gigabyte partition. So right there. Now at this point we can type P again, and we can see that we have a partition printed now. Alright, so basically to save our changes, I'm going to go ahead and put W to write. And now when we list our block devices, we can see that we have a partition under our second disk. So at this point, if we want to be able to use this new partition in our operating system, we have to create a file system for it, and for that you can do the makefs. You can use the mkfs command, just make file system. For now, I'll just go ahead and do a -t for type, and then xfs, which is the default for CentOS 7 or Red Hat 7. So yeah, we do make file system -t for type, xfs, and then the actual partition. So in this case, SDB1. And of course, we forgot to run it with sudo, so oops. Sudo. And there we go. We've gone ahead and created a file system on the newly created partition. So I'm going to go ahead and list the block devices. And now we can actually also do sudo block ID to print out our partitions along with their unique IDs. You can see they're both type XFS. So let's say I wanted to use this 10 gigabytes on my disk in a directory somewhere on my virtual machine. And in this case, I can create, disk storage 2. I'm making this directory, right? Say I want to mount dev sdb 1 into my disk storage 2. Oh, sorry, sudo. Should have just switched to root. But okay, so now, right, if I list my directory, I can create files in here. Shoot. Files in here. So when we see our mounted file systems, we can see that our dev sdb1 partition is mounted in this directory. 10 gigs, only 1% is being used. So if I were to reboot my machine, this, if I were to reboot my machine, then our what am I doing? Yeah, then our file system wouldn't be mounted anymore. To make this persistent, we basically have to specify it in our fstab file, and we can do that. We can see the current one, right, by doing etc, by catting etc fstab, and we can see that we have the initial one set up here. So what I'm gonna do is basically do the sudo block ID, copy the unique ID for that second disk, then do sudo vim etc fstab. Oh, come on, we don't have vim. Alright. And basically we can just follow the original one as reference. In this case, I have it mounted in home vagrant. Oops. Right. Home vagrant. type XFS. We want to mount it with defaults, and we don't want file system checks or backups, so we'll do 00. So to test our changes, we can always just run a mount-a, sudo mount-a. This will go ahead and mount everything in our fstab file. If for any reason you made a typo in there or something, you'll see an error and catch it before rebooting, because if you do mess up your fstab file and you reboot, you're gonna run into booting issues. So definitely run sudo mount-a to test your changes before rebooting. But in this case, we didn't get any errors. We see that our file system is mounted here. So we can go ahead and reboot it, and we can go ahead and reboot it to make sure that the change persists. So I'll go ahead and do vagrant SSH. Probably wait a few seconds for it to come back up. But once we're in, we should be able to see whether the disk is mounted or not. Okay, so we've gone ahead and dropped back in. The system has rebooted, and we can see that our 10 gigabyte partition is mounted, and we didn't run into any issues when we restarted the machine. So hopefully this gives you a quick rundown on how to use Fdisk to create a new partition on your new disk, and how to create a file system on that new partition, and lastly how to mount that new file system onto your system. So as always, if you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up. If you run into any issues or you just have any questions, you can go ahead and drop them in the comments. As always, I appreciate you guys watching, and I want to thank you guys for all the support so far. So thank you, and have a great day.